Hello, Cynthia. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you so much
This
for inviting me.
this is so good to have you again here.
It is very nice to be here again. I was so sorry that we had the technical problems on my end that ended our interview very quickly last time.
Yeah, unfortunately it was. Unfortunately it was. Due to some technical reasons. And meanwhile, I come to know through Murshida Nuria that your mother is not feeling well. How is she now?
Well, thank you very much for asking. She's not doing well today. She has good days and bad days, more bad than good, actually. She's 93 years old, and I'm at home caring for her. So she's not having a very good day today, but she's okay. And she wishes me well and wanted me to go ahead and, come for the interview.
That's great. That's great. My prayers and my good wishes with her and your whole family.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
let's start from where we left last time. The journey in search of Rumi.
Yes.
How the idea came, basically, how the idea came.
In search of Rumi, well, I can give you a short answer first, and then I'll give you the longer answer.
Sure.
In search of Rumi, the first experience I had getting to know, so to speak, Rumi was I was in a spiritual bookstore and I was looking for inspirational reading. And it just so happened that a translation of Rumi's poetry, The Essential Rumi by Coleman Barks, fell off the shelf, so to speak, into my hands. And I opened it up, as I often do with a book, to get a glimpse of what it's going to be like. And I read a few lines. And I have to say that I was simply stunned right there in the bookstore, just thinking that I could not believe that anyone was writing about the mystical union with Allah or God or the universe in such a manner that it was even possible to put that connection, that mystical union that occurs between a human and God, to put that on paper in words. I didn't think it was possible. And I think that that moment really made me an appreciator of Jalaluddin Muhammad Rumi immediately. And then as I read more and more, I began to appreciate even more his beautiful spiritual path that he was on. I saw him as describing the indescribable, really, as getting about as close as you can get. Maybe you can't exactly in words express what that mystical union is like, but I thought that he was getting about as close as you could in describing the divine or the ineffable. He would probably say that he never quite reached it, because I know a lot of his poems, he ends in silence. He says, the rest is silence, so to speak. Stop talking, words are useless, and all of that. And yet, to me, he comes about as close as you can come, and perhaps Kabir and Tagore and a few other poets in reaching the unattainable, which is describing the ineffable divine. So I began to read his poetry, and I simply loved the whole path that he was on. I read more and more about him, and I loved his whole communication through the heart, and him speaking through the heart, him speaking to others' hearts. The whole heart communication that was clearly occurring between him and his students, because I began to read that he was writing his poetry for his students to teach them, to inspire them. And I loved the fact that he was essentially doing that through the heart, and saying that the whole communication with Allah was through the heart, and that's the way you could find this union that he was writing about in all of his poetry. I loved that. I felt that the whole path to me was very mysterious in some ways, as I think the divine is always mysterious to some extent, but it was also very familiar. It really struck me in my heart. It's as if he was communicating to me through my heart, his heart to my heart. And again, the heart feeling I got from his poetry. I remember reading about how he composed his poetry in that book, and how he would simply feel the connection. He would whirl or turn, and then he would feel a connection with the divine and begin to spout off his poetry, and a student would write it down. I don't think he ever wrote a poem himself other than the first one. The others were written by his students. And the first one, of course, is a classic, iconic poem of his that still speaks to me. And then I later, as I researched him more and more for making the film, Rumi Returning, I realized how important this poem was to him and how significant it was to his life as I learned more about him. But I think it speaks to anyone, really. I'm speaking about the reed poem. Listen to the reed and the tale it tells, how it sings of separation. Ever since they cut me from the reed bed, my wail has caused strong men to weep. Anyone who has been pulled from his source longs to return. And so that's the whole, in essence, his journey, as I began to learn about him, the journey of returning and the journey of feeling the separation and yearning to return. And that's ultimately why we made the title of our film on his life, which is his biography, Rumi Returning, because we wanted to bring across that feeling of him longing to return to his home, which in real life he wanted to return to his original birthplace, which was in the Persian Empire, now Afghanistan, and then he had to flee it with his family because of the Mongol invasion, and he went to what is now Turkey. But he always longed to return to his homeland, but he was really using that as a metaphor for his homeland with God. And so that poem has always struck me as being a very beautiful one in so many ways, and I can relate to it. It makes strong men weep. Well, it also touches me as well. That's the short version of how I learned about Rumi, just through that book. And then I read a lot of other translations and met many people who were Sufis and on that path, and interviewed them for the film. But how the film came about and was interesting also, and it was synchronistic or miraculous, if you will, because I was on a spiritual path myself, having lost my husband of 25 years. And, grief can be a great teacher, as many of us know. I don't think there's any human who hasn't felt some grief in their lives. And I had been married very happily to my husband for 25 years, and he got cancer and survived 18 months and then transitioned. And so I was on the path of grief at that time. And I might just mention I looked at a few statements that Rumi has written about grief, and I think these are pretty interesting. These pains you feel are messengers. Listen to them. That's kind of a great statement for someone who's feeling grief. The deeper the sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. I mean, what a hopeful message that is for someone who's lost someone. And of course, he's writing about his experience with Shams and losing his teacher and, all of that. And he lost his father, which was very traumatic for him earlier in his life. Death has nothing to do with going away. The sun sets, the moon sets, but they are not gone. And don't grieve. Anything you lose comes around in another form. And these are English translations, but I think they do give a flavor of what he was saying about death and about grieving the loss of someone. Do not let your heart get rusty with grief, And The Guest House is one of his most famous poems, in which he talks about, this life, ourselves being a guest house, and sorrows come in and welcome them. Don't just welcome the joys, but welcome the sorrows as well, because they are coming as messengers or teachers to you, and you need to learn their lessons. So I was, to get back to how I started the film, I was on my own grief journey. And so I was becoming more spiritual in terms of looking at other paths and just reading sacred texts of all different faiths. And I became what you would call an interfaith a person or appreciator of interfaith. And I started going to conferences that had people of all faiths, and they would talk about them. And one of the future commentators in Rumi Returning was at one of these conferences, Dr. Akbar Ahmed, who is actually from Pakistan, and he is now in the United States, and he teaches at American University Islamic Studies and International Relations. And I met him, and he spoke about Rumi. And so I thought, oh boy, he would be a wonderful speaker on that subject. And so all of these things were just happening to me synchronistically, and my co-producer as well. And so we happened to be invited to an interfaith dinner in Phoenix, Arizona, where I was living at the time. And we sat right next to a man from Turkey, and he started talking about his country, and we should visit it, and it was a wonderful place and all of that. And of course, Rumi came up because Konya is in Turkey. And so we started talking about that and how we would love to go there and see his shrine and, all of that. And the man said, well, I think I could make that happen for you, and we were taken aback. We were very surprised, but we've also found that when you're making spiritual documentaries, oftentimes things just fall into your lap, or they fall into place, and that's what happened here. As it turned out, the man was a part of an organization that sent, people, Americans to Turkey. And so we ended up going there. And once we knew that we were going there, that's when we decided that we would make the entire film on Rumi. Because of his message, because of the timing of it. It was after 9/11, and we felt there was a great surge, I would say, of hatred toward anything relating to Islam or Muslim, and just a whole lot of ignorance about it as well. And so we felt like the best thing we could do for the world as documentary filmmakers would be to bring forward the beauty of this path and just educate people a little on the whole topic, but also to inspire them, most of all to inspire them. And Rumi is also a great person to do that because he himself was an interfaith figure. And we bring that into the film Rumi Returning, how he, when he passed away, transitioned to where he was longing to go with Allah. He would, there were people not only of the Muslim faith, but there were Jewish people and Christian people and probably Zoroastrian, there mourning his loss. And so he was seen as a bridge, as it were, among these faiths, and he respected all of them, and therefore they respected him as well. So he was a a great figure in many ways, because he had that message. He has the message of love. Also, we knew just from research that he was the most popular poet in the world. Here's this man who lived in the 13th century, and his message is just reaching out to people today. Such a foreign and long distance away, living a different kind of lifestyle as he did, and all of that, but yet his words were somehow reaching people today. And we found that to be very amazing. And so we wanted to capitalize on that, that interest that people had in Rumi and his popularity, and to bring forward this inspirational message of his to more and more people. And so we were able to go that time to Konya the first time, and then 2 more times later. And I'll go through each of the trips. The first one was absolutely amazing. We got off the plane, and our guide, who had been suggested to us, and I'm trying to remember who suggested him, but somebody suggested that we meet this man, and he whisked us away into his car, and he took us to a zikr. And so it was an amazing first night in Konya, an immersion into the experience of the zikr. And we were actually very tired and wanted to go to sleep. We said, "No, Uzir, we can't. We've got to go sleep, in our hotel." But no, he wouldn't have it, and he was so right to have taken us there that first night. And there was a dinner afterwards, and it was one of the high points in my life in terms of meeting people from other countries, because I had the good fortune to sit with the ladies. He was with the men, but we had a wonderful conversation, heart to heart again. And only one of the ladies in our circle spoke English, but that was enough, because we were able to communicate in a way that you can in a foreign country, even though you don't speak the language. I had learned thank you, but that was about it with my Turkish. But so anyway, the first trip to Konya was absolutely amazing in so many respects. It was very, very mystical. The man who was our guide his uncle had tended the Rumi shrine. He lived right across the street from the Rumi shrine, and was the director of the Dervish Brothers Center there. And at first he said he didn't think he wanted to be interviewed, and but later he talked to me. He interviewed me before I was able to interview him, I guess, to see, if he could trust me as someone, that he would open his heart to. And he ended up doing that. And I hope we'll be able to see the trailer, and then we may see him in there, and I'll point him out. And you'll see the professor too, I'm sure, from American University, Dr. Akbar Ahmed, and then you'll see probably Coleman Barks, the translator of the Essential Rumi, and Andrew Harvey, who is another American translator of Rumi. So would you like to show that now?
Yeah, sure. Let me.
Because that'll put into context the rest of what I'm going to say about making it.
Yeah, let me play that trailer.
Yes, if you'd like.
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay.
I would love to.
Rumi wrote, "The whole world will grow green with our love."
The turning energy, it's the energy of love.
The intensity that the Sufi brings to his love is like a laser.
gamble everything for love. If you're a true human being. Rumi Returning.
So it was the beautiful effort, and I really appreciate that it went well.
Yes. So, well, in that little short trailer, and we make them short and sweet, we hope. You saw the beautiful mosque in the background from Istanbul. You saw, of course, there are a number of beautiful mosques there, but that you saw both groups of whirling dervishes that we filmed. We were fortunate to film the dervishes in Konya, but also in there was a big presentation that they were providing in Konya in a big auditorium, but then we also filmed a different group of whirling dervishes in Istanbul. There was a tekka there where they were performing, and that was a closer, smaller group. But you saw that, which is so beautiful, and so you get a little taste of the beauty, and that's one of the perhaps the best thing about the film, really. Throw out our writing and our interviewing, just the sights that you see are so beautiful, just so beautiful. To me, Istanbul is one of the great, cities in the world, and the beauty in it is timeless. And we have a lot of it in the film because we were there 3 times filming. You also saw the 4 people I was talking about who were the commentators. We've got Colban Bark saying, "Gamble everything for love if you're a true human being." And then he doesn't say the next line that Rumi says, but I love it. "If not, leave this gathering." Gamble everything for love if you're a true human being. If not, leave. And I love that because Rumi, is telling his students, as I mentioned earlier, I learned that he wrote all the poetry for his students. And he's just really telling them, okay, you're in this group, but leave if you're not willing to gamble everything for love. And so that's a great line in and of itself. And then Dr. Akbar Ahmed that you saw from American University, he actually ends the film with a quotation that he says should be the mantra or the slogan for the 20th and 21st century. And that Rumi's lines, I go to the mosque, I go to the church, I go to the synagogue, and I see the same altar. And he ends the film that way. We let him, end the film with that statement and that quote from Rumi, because again, we feel like that's one of the beautiful parts of Rumi's message is, yes, he was, on his path, but he did seem to respect the other paths. And he also saw that, the paths are leading the same direction. And, of course, all the great mystics have said that, but it's a beautiful message. And Dr. Ahmed was saying that he felt that should be the slogan, for the world today. And we agree that is a great message for us to all agree to, that the altars are the same and the paths are all leading the same direction. And so that was one part of the film, but that was the ending, and that was a high point. You saw Uzir that I mentioned, the director of the Dervish Brothers Center in Konya, and he was holding that, and he talks about the turning being the energy of love. And in the film, I describe the sema, and we see the whirling dervishes, but he really explains the true nature of it, and that it is love, and that they are turning to empty themselves completely of themselves so that the divine can come in. And he does it in a very beautiful way, describing it. And he talks about the heart turning. And it's interesting because when I first interviewed him, and he said that about the heart turning, I thought he misspoke. I thought he made a mistake. But that was me on my journey, not knowing enough to understand what he was saying. And I've always felt that he was one of my spiritual teachers, because every time I went, he taught me so much in the short period of time that I was in Konya. And he had gatherings in his center, and he drew me into those. And he was, just a very, well, he's likable, of course, but he's also a good teacher in his own way. And so I did learn a lot from everybody I interviewed, but I think from him the most, because he was on the path. And so there's nothing like learning from someone on the path. And yeah. he was that. So just as now the last couple of years I've been co-producing 2 films on Mahatma Gandhi, and now one on Gandhi's wife, Kasturba Gandhi. And the idea is that, you learn so much by interviewing a Gandhian, someone who is living Gandhi's path. So this was very, very important to me to meet Uzir and understand somewhat. I can't say I understand everything, but he helped me understand some things about Rumi. It really was a time of almost a decade where I was studying Rumi, immersing myself, interviewing, but also meeting others on the path, and trying to learn as much as I could so that I could help to, present it to the world, and it would be authentic enough that people would be moved by it. And I think they were, because it was very successful, and the film was on PBS stations, which are the public stations in the United States. So it was seen by millions of people. And I know the first time we introduced it at a film festival in Santa Fe, New Mexico, United States, it was sold out and people were standing in line. There were like 200 people standing in line who couldn't get in, the first premiere of it. So again, people very, very interested in this message. And some people, see it perhaps just his message as just a description of love between maybe a man and a woman or whatever, but many do see it as something that applies to, him and the divine, and see it as that, as such, and understand that the descriptions he gives of the love between a man and a woman is more like a metaphor for that greater love, and it encompasses all loves. So that is included as part of the love. So anyway, very, very exciting to have produced it because of the impact that it had. And you could see people being very excited by it and inspired, I should say. For example, we were invited to many places to show it. And one was the Festival for Sufi Culture in Fez, Morocco. And that was a wonderful experience to go there and to meet everyone there. And there were a number of Sufi musicians. There was a female a cappella group called Rabia, for example. It was great. They were so beautiful. But when we showed the film, a lot of the people, it was also packed, you know, and a lot of the people didn't speak English, but they told us, you know, the people told us later through a translator that it didn't matter to some extent because they could still, you know, they could still glean a lot from the visuals, the sound, and you know, the translations. So it was quite an experience. I could go on about where we went with the film. We took it to the World Peace Festival in Berlin, you know, and this was people from all around the world. I gave a lecture on Rumi at the National Museum in Prague, Czechoslovakia, because they were having a festival on Rumi. And, you know, the London Theosophical Center, you know, the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., in the United States. Twice we showed the film and it was sold out. This was at, you know, one of the greatest places in the country. Yeah. And so it just speaks to, and Andrew Harvey, one of the speakers in that short clip, was with us too. And it just really speaks to the way he is able to reach people. Rumi is able to reach so many people. And yeah, so the whole experience of making it, I jumped ahead to showing it, but making it, again, we went the first, second, and third time there. They were each amazing, you know, experiences. I would also mention that first time there were a number of mystical things that occurred, like we were out walking in Konya at night and this white dog came up to us and just stared at us. You know, we were right by the cemetery with all the, you know, it was just, you know, we just felt like we were getting messages from Rumi himself. We also got the approval, I'm happy to say, to be the first Western filmmakers to film inside the shrine. So we actually were able to film Rumi's tomb, his father's and others, very, very sacred people inside the shrine of Rumi. And I hope some of the people watching this and hearing my voice have either gone to Konya or can someday, because it is a very mystical experience. The third visit we were in Konya, I had a mystical experience at Sham's tomb. We were there and filming, and that's in the film, this scene where we were filming, and a little boy walks up, and it's a great shot. He looks at the tomb of Shams, and we're filming there, and you know, it's in the midst of a film, and I hear Shams say, "I'm in charge of this shoot," you know, "I'm in charge of this," and it was just one of those kind of moments where I really felt that I was connected in many ways to Rumi and Shams, and we filmed two dervishes who were standing in for Rumi and Shams, and they did a prayer between the two and then allowed us to film it. So we set up scenes in Konya to stand for scenes in Rumi's life, and they were standing for, these two men were allowing us to film them, and they were Rumi and Shams. So we were very fortunate to get the support and help of many of the community there to film the scenes that we did. There was a young boy who, excuse me, stood in for the young Rumi, and he was in the authentic, you know, costume or clothing that they would have worn during that time. And We had someone stand in for Rumi and someone for the father, and so we had people, they weren't really actors. I shouldn't call them that. We use that in the film business, but that's not really what they were. They were the real thing, standing in for Rumi and Shams and the young Rumi.
That's great.
So so we were able to do that kind of filming, which was great. I've got a little bit of a scratch in my throat.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna take a lesson.
Yeah. Please go ahead. So it was nice experience to not only film Rumi, but to feel what Rumi was.
Yes, that was probably the best part. Is to feel as much as I could. Just his whole message, which is so beautiful and so powerful. If it's almost indescribable. I'm trying to describe how I felt, but I have always been moved, even before I started studying Rumi, by the Sema. I had seen the whirling dervishes, and I had felt that there was a strong mystical connection, going on, and I think that that brought about in me a kind of yearning, like Rumi felt, to connect with the divine. And so it's interesting when you meet other people who are on the path, the spiritual path, and they can inspire you in a way that, of course, reading the poetry or just even seeing a film or something may not, as much as meeting the person who is embodying the principles or the values, the love, really. And I think you can oftentimes feel that. Again, I guess it's through the heart, feeling someone who is inspired by this loving message of love and peace and connection with the divine. Does that make sense?
True that. Yeah, completely. And Cynthia, I am so grateful that you spared time for this session. And when we are able to complete the discussion in search of Rumi, the session about in search of Rumi, and I know this is hard time. Your mother is ill. You were taking care of her. You were spending time with her, and during this all, you spared time. I'm really grateful and hopeful that one day you will be able to film some Pakistani mystics or mystics who are here in Pakistan. There are some few great folks like Sultan Bahu is there, Baba Farid is there, uh, Lal Shahbaz Kalandar is there, and they all are wonderful people. They have wonderful stories, they have wonderful lineage, they have wonderful teachings, and hope to see you soon in Pakistan filming documentaries about the mystics of Pakistan as well.
Oh, I
And
would love to. That would be an amazing journey for me, but also wonderful to share with the world. I've always wanted to go to Pakistan, so I hope that I can someday.
whenever you plan, I am ready to host you. I am here to host you.
Oh, how nice. How nice. That would be wonderful.
Thank you, Cynthia, for your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you so
It
much.
was a real pleasure to. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.